You think you understand the sting of being overlooked until your own mother labels your wedding a disgrace? You think you know respect until the man they dismissed as a simple plumber appears on national television to silence an entire country. 10 weeks ago, I was begging for a seat at their table. Tonight, sitting in this sterile New York City green room, I am finally building my own right in front of their eyes. My name is Aurora Rivera, and right now, I am sitting in a holding room that feels less like a television studio and more like a high-security interrogation cell in a political thriller. The lighting in here is aggressive, a clinical white glare that leaves no shadows to hide in. There are no bowls of colorful candy or comfortable beige sofas. Instead, two men with earpieces and suits that cost more than my first car are pacing by the heavy steel door, speaking in low, clipped tones into their wrists. They are not looking at me. To them, I am just the spouse, the plus one, the collateral damage. I look down at my hands resting in my lap. I am wearing a simple navy dress I bought off the rack 3 years ago for a corporate retreat. It is clean, but the fabric is starting to pill slightly at the hem. My fingernails are short, unpolished, and the index finger on my left hand has a small chip near the cuticle from nervously picking at a staple earlier today. But the gold band on my ring finger is solid. It catches the harsh studio light and throws a tiny, defiant spark back at me. My heart is hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that feels loud enough to be picked up by the boom microphones in the hallway. On the wall opposite me, a flat-screen television is muted, but the chyron crawling across the bottom is screaming in bright red pixels, live special broadcast. Then, the vibration starts again. My phone is face down on the small metal table next to me, but I know exactly who it is. The screen lights up, casting a ghostly blue glow against the metal. Mom. It buzzes once, twice, 3 times, a relentless, angry insect demanding attention. A minute ago, it was Dad. Before that, my sister. My family is blowing up my phone with the desperation of people who realize they have lost control of the narrative. I do not reach for it. I do not turn it over. I just let it vibrate until it exhausts itself and goes dark. They want to talk now. They want to explain. But my mind is not here in New York City. It is pulled back 10 weeks ago to a humid morning in Charleston, South Carolina. The memory hits me with the scent of salt air, heavy hairspray, and expensive white hydrangeas. It was supposed to be the happiest morning of my life. The bridal suite overlooked the ocean, and the windows were open, letting the breeze tangle with the sheer curtains. I was sitting in front of a vanity mirror, trying to breathe, while my best friend, Chloe, stood by the window with my phone in her hand. Chloe is the kind of woman who does not believe in soft landings. She believes in the truth, even when it cuts. She was scrolling through the family group chat, her eyebrows nodding together in a way that made my stomach drop. "Read it," I said, my voice sounding smaller than I wanted it to be. Chloe hesitated, which was unlike her. She looked up, her eyes fierce and protective. "Aurora, you do not need to hear this right now. You need to put on your veil and drink this mimosa." "Read it, Chloe," she sighed, a sharp exhale through her nose, and looked back at the screen. "It is a disgrace," she read, her voice flat. "Tell her we are not coming down to watch her throw her life away on a manual laborer. The whole thing is a circus. We will stay in Raleigh and save our dignity." The room went silent. The only sound was the ocean churning outside, indifferent to my humiliation. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. I had spent 33 years trying to be the daughter they wanted, the one who got the good grades, the one who chose the safe corporate job in risk compliance, the one who never made a scene. And yet, here I was, minutes away from walking down the aisle, and I was still trying to convince myself that they loved me enough to show up. "They are just worried," I said to the mirror, fixing a loose strand of hair. "They will come, once they see us, once they realize how happy I am. They will walk through that door. Mom just likes to be dramatic." But the woman in the mirror did not believe me. Her eyes looked hollow. She looked like a child waiting for a parent to pick her up from school long after the other cars had driven away. From the corner of the room, there was a metallic click. I turned. Miles was there, my husband-to-be. He was not supposed to be in the bridal suite, but the door handle to the bathroom had jammed earlier, trapping one of the bridesmaids. And Miles had just fixed it. He was wearing his tuxedo pants and a crisp white undershirt, his dress shirt and jacket hanging on a chair. He was kneeling on the floor, a small screwdriver in his hand, one he had pulled from the portable toolkit he kept in his truck. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't checking his phone. He was just calmly reassembling the locking mechanism of the vintage door. He looked up, catching my eye. He had heard what Chloe read. He had to have heard it. But there was no anger in his face, no insecurity, just a profound, terrifying calmness. The strike plate was misaligned, he said softly, his voice a low rumble that settled the air in the room. He stood up, wiping his hands on a rag he had produced from somewhere. It is fixed now. It will close properly. I looked at him, this man my parents called the plumber, with a sneer, as if honest work was a contagion. He had broad shoulders and hands that were rough with calluses, hands that built things and fixed things and held me when I felt like I was falling apart. He didn't care about the gala in Raleigh. He didn't care about my mother's definition of dignity. He saw a problem, and he fixed it. He didn't need their approval to exist. In that moment, I found him both the most lovely thing I had ever seen and utterly terrifying, because I realized he wasn't trying to fit into my world. He was inviting me to step into his, a world where things were real, where actions mattered more than optics. "Aurora?" he asked, stepping toward me. "I'm okay," I lied. He didn't call me out on it. He just nodded, trusting that I would be okay when I was ready. Back in the cold light of the New York waiting room, the memory fades as the volume on the television swells. The commercial break is over. I look up. The screen is filled with the image of a studio set. Sleek, modern, serious. The host, a woman whose opinion shapes national conversations, turns to the camera with a gravity that makes the breath catch in my throat. "Welcome back," she says. "Tonight, we are not talking about politics or celebrity scandals. We are talking about the invisible infrastructure that keeps our society from collapsing, and the men and women who maintain it in the dark. Our guest tonight is a man you might walk past on the street without a second glance, a technician, a blue-collar worker, a plumber." My breath hitches. "But to the Department of Homeland Security and 27 survivors of the Mid-Atlantic Tunnel collapse," she continues, pausing for effect, "he is something else entirely." The camera cuts to a wide shot. There he is, Miles. He is sitting in a chair that looks too small for him, wearing a dark suit that fits him perfectly, looking uncomfortable but steady. He is not there to brag. He is not there to seek fame. "Please welcome Miles Rivera," the host says. I stare at the screen, and then down at my phone, which has finally stopped buzzing. A realization washes over me. Cold and clear as water, for my entire life, my family has held the pen, writing the story of who I was and who I was allowed to be. But as Miles looks into the camera lens, his eyes finding a way to look straight through the screen and right at me, I know the truth. Today, my family lost the pen. I am 34 years old, and on paper, I am exactly the woman my parents raised me to be. I work as a senior risk compliance officer at Veridian Trust, a financial firm that manages money for people who have never touched a doorknob they did not own. My job is entirely about predicting disaster. I look at spreadsheets, I analyze regulatory shifts, and I tell powerful men where the ice is too thin to walk. I am good at it because I have been training for it since I was a toddler in Raleigh, North Carolina, in my family. You did not just live, you performed. And if you could not perform, you made sure you did not cause a scene. My parents are the kind of people who believe that a problem does not exist if the neighbors do not know about it. They treat their reputation like a piece of antique furniture, something to be polished daily and never actually used. Growing up, I was never the protagonist of the Rivera household. That role belonged to my younger sister, Sienna. Sienna is a lifestyle influencer with 200,000 followers who think her chaotic mornings are charming because she films them with a ring light. She turns everything into content. I have seen her live stream a funeral, angling the camera so her waterproof mascara looked tragic but tasteful. I was the other daughter, the practical one, the one who was not pretty enough to be a trophy and not charming enough to be a socialite. So I was encouraged to be sensible. When I got straight A's. My father did not say he was proud. He said that was expected. When I got a promotion, my mother asked if it came with a better parking spot so people could see I was important. I spent 3 decades trying to earn a currency that they were never going to pay me. Then I met Miles. It was not a romance novel meeting. I did not drop a stack of papers that he gallantly retrieved. It was a Tuesday, and the pipe under my kitchen sink had burst, flooding my pristine, sensible apartment with lukewarm gray water. I called the building management, and they sent him. He arrived exactly when he said he would. He did not make a joke about women drivers or women homeowners. He did not look at my chest. He walked into the kitchen, assessed the damage with a terrifying proficiency, and went to work. I watched him from the living room. He moved with an economy of motion that I found mesmerizing. There was no wasted energy. He cut the pipe, fitted the new joint, and tightened it with a focus that made the rest of the world disappear. When he finished, he wrote up the invoice and handed it to me. His hands were rough, stained with grease that no amount of scrubbing would fully remove. But his handwriting was architectural, clean, block letters, precise. "It will hold," he told me. "You will not have to worry about this again." That was it. That was the seduction. In a life filled with people who overpromised and underdelivered, here was a man who simply said a thing would work, and then made sure it did. We went for coffee 2 days later. He drank his black. He listened to me talk about credit default swaps without eyes glazing over. Not because he loved finance, but because he was interested in how my mind worked. I fell in love with him because he was the first person who ever looked at me and did not see a project. He did not want to fix me. He did not want to upgrade me. He just wanted to be near me. He promised me safety, not stardom. He told me, "I am not going anywhere." And for the first time in my life, I believed a promise, but I should have known that my happiness would be an unauthorized renovation to my family's carefully constructed facade. When I called my mother to tell her I was engaged, there was no squeal of delight. There was a pause, heavy and static-filled, long enough for me to count the beats of my own racing heart. "What is his last name?" she asked. "Rivera," I said. "Same as ours. Funny, right?" "And where did he go to school?" "He went to a trade technical college in Ohio," I said, my voice tightening. "He is a master technician. Mom, he runs his own business." "So?" she said, the temperature in her voice dropping 10 degrees. "He is a laborer. Does he have a real job? Aurora? Or are you going to be supporting him while he chases blue-collar dreams?" It was not just snobbery. It was fear. To my parents, status was a fortress, and I was inviting a barbarian inside the gates. I tried to explain that Miles made more money in a bad month than I did in a good one, that he owned 2 properties, that he was brilliant in a way that did not require a Latin diploma, but they stopped listening the moment they heard Plumber. I kept telling myself that once they met him, they would see what I saw. I thought his quiet strength would win them over. I thought his decency was undeniable. My best friend, Chloe, tried to warn me over drinks one night, about a month before the wedding. "Aurora, stop trying to sell him to them," she said, swirling her martini. "They do not hate him because he is poor, which he is not. They do not hate him because he is uneducated, which he is not. They hate him because they cannot control him. He does not need their approval, and to a narcissist, indifference is a declaration of war." I pushed her words away. I was a risk analyst, and I refused to see the red flags in my own life. I also refused to look too closely at the red flags Miles was planting. however unintentional they were. There were signs that Miles was not exactly who he said he was, or perhaps that he was exactly who he said he was, but with a history he had edited out for my benefit. He had a toolbox that stayed in the back of our closet. It was a heavy red metal box, battered and scratched, locked with a high-security padlock that looked strong enough to secure a bank vault. Plumbers have tools, yes, but they do not usually lock them up in their own master bedroom like they contain state secrets. And there were the phone calls. Sometimes, late at night, his phone would buzz, not a ring, just a single, sharp vibration. He would look at it, his face shifting from husband to something colder, something sharper. He would step out onto the balcony, sliding the glass door shut behind him. Through the glass, I would watch him. He never paced. He stood perfectly still, listening, speaking in short bursts. When he came back inside, the coldness would vanish, replaced by his usual warm, easy smile. "Just a client with an emergency," he would say. I never asked why a client needed a plumber at 2 a.m. on a Sunday. I never asked why he didn't take the toolbox to work. I was so busy defending him from my family that I was afraid to ask him the questions that might prove them right, that he was hiding something. I wanted the fairy tale of the simple, honest man so badly that I ignored the fact that simplicity is rarely simple. I just wanted to be safe, but safety, I was learning, is an illusion. You can verify every variable. You can insure against every disaster, but you can never predict the moment the people who are supposed to love you decide to break your heart just to keep up appearances. And you certainly cannot predict that the man sleeping next to you, the one with the calloused hands and the gentle snore, might be the most dangerous variable of all. The white wooden chairs were arranged in perfect, symmetrical rows on the lawn, facing the Atlantic Ocean. The florist had done exactly what I asked. Draping the aisle in eucalyptus and white roses, everything was technically perfect. The string quartet was tuning their instruments, a soft, discordant hum that usually signals the beginning of something beautiful. But as I stood in the vestibule of the historic house, peering through the French doors, all I could see was the gaping hole in the geometry of the day. The front row on the left side, the bride's side, was empty. It was not a scattering of empty seats. It was a deliberate void. 4 chairs, reserved with thick cream cardstock that read, "Reserved for the family of the bride," sat vacant. They looked like missing teeth in a perfect smile. My wedding coordinator, a sweet woman named Sarah, who had spent the last hour trying to distract me with questions about the canapes, finally stopped pretending. She touched my arm, her touch light and pitying. "Aurora," she whispered, "we are 10 minutes past the start time. Should we wait a little longer?" I looked at my phone. I knew they were not late. Traffic in Charleston could be bad, but not this bad. I opened Instagram, my thumb hovering over the app icon like I was about to detonate a bomb. I tapped on my sister's story. The screen filled with a live video. The location tag did not say Charleston. It said Raleigh, North Carolina. "Hey guys," Sienna's voice chirped, tinny and bright through the speaker. She was wearing a silver gown that shimmered under expensive chandeliers. "We are here at the Founders Gala. Mom and Dad are over there rubbing elbows with the mayor. It is going to be such a huge night for our brand." She panned the camera. There they were, my parents. My father was holding a scotch, laughing at something a man in a tuxedo was saying. My mother looked regal in emerald green, her hand resting possessively on my father's arm. They looked happy. They looked complete. They were 200 miles away, sipping champagne, while their eldest daughter stood in a wedding dress, alone. They had not just skipped my wedding, they had replaced it with a networking event. The phone vibrated in my hand, startling me. A text message from Mom appeared at the top of the screen, slicing through the image of her smiling face. "If you go through with this, do not expect to call us family on Monday. We do not support mistakes." I felt the blood drain from my face, pooling somewhere in my feet. The room started to spin. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. My hands were shaking so hard that the phone slipped from my grip and clattered onto the hardwood floor. The reflex was immediate and sickening. I wanted to call her. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to tell Sarah to cancel the music, send everyone home, and drive to Raleigh to beg for forgiveness. It was a muscle memory carved into my bones over 3 decades. The need to fix their disappointment, to smooth over the rough edges of their ego. I reached down for the phone, my fingers fumbling. "I can fix this," a voice in my head screamed. "I can still be the good daughter." Then the French doors opened. I froze. Miles was standing there. He was supposed to be at the altar. It was bad luck for the groom to see the bride before the walk. Everyone knew that, but Miles did not care about luck. He cared about facts, and the fact was, I was not walking. He stood in the doorway, framed by the bright afternoon sun. He looked at me, really looked at me, and then his eyes drifted to the phone in my hand, and then to the empty chairs visible through the glass. He did not ask where they were. He did not ask if I was okay. He knew. He stepped into the vestibule, closing the door behind him, shutting out the murmuring guests. The silence between us was heavy, but it wasn't oppressive. It was the silence of a shelter during a storm. "They are not coming," I whispered, the admission tasting like ash. Miles walked over to me. He did not look angry. He looked determined. He took my cold, trembling hands in his warm ones. His thumbs brushed over my knuckles, grounding me. "No," he said simply. "They are not. I can't walk out there." "Miles," I said, my voice cracking. "Everyone will see. They will see the empty seats. They will know I am not enough." Miles let go of my hands and reached up to cup my face. His palms were rough, and the friction against my skin felt more real than anything else in that moment. "Aurora, look at me." I forced my eyes to meet his. "You were never going to be enough for them because they are bottomless pits," he said. "You cannot fill a cup that has no bottom." He looked toward the doors, then back at me. He made a decision. I saw it happen in his eyes, a shift from participant to protector. "We are changing the plan," he said. "What?" "You are not walking down that aisle alone to meet me," he said. "That is a tradition for women who are being given away. Nobody is giving you away. Aurora, you belong to yourself." He offered me his arm. It was strong, steady, unyielding. "If you have to walk a path that feels empty," he said, "then we walk it together, from the start. I am not waiting at the end anymore. I am starting right here." I looked at his arm. Then I looked at the door. For 34 years, I had waited for permission. I had waited to be invited to the table. I had waited to be worthy. But looking at Miles, I realized that worthiness was not something you were given. It was something you claimed. I hooked my arm through his. "Okay," I said. "Let's go." We signaled Sarah. She looked shocked, but she nodded and opened the double doors wide. The music swelled. Not the traditional wedding march, but a song we had picked together. As we stepped out onto the grass, a hush fell over the crowd. People were confused. The groom was not at the altar. He was at the back, with the bride. We walked. I kept my head high, but my eyes inevitably flickered to the left. The 4 empty white chairs screamed at me. They were a public declaration of rejection. I felt a sting of tears, hot and humiliating. But then, something happened on the right, on Miles's side of the aisle. The chairs were full. There were guys he had played football with in high school. There were old women whose heaters he had fixed for free during the blizzard last year. There were his employees, rough-looking men in ill-fitting suits who were wiping their eyes. And as we passed them, they stood up. It started with his best man, but it spread like a wave. They didn't just sit and watch. They rose. It wasn't formal protocol. It was a shield. They were standing to block the view of the empty seats on the left. They were standing to say, "We are here." One of his friends, a giant man named Big Sal, caught my eye and winked. "You look beautiful, Aurora," he whispered loudly. The laughter that rippled through the crowd broke the tension. I squeezed Miles's arm. He squeezed back, harder. I looked at the empty seats one last time. And I made a vow to myself. I will never beg for a seat at a table where I'm not welcome again. But the heart is a treacherous thing. Even as I stood at the altar, holding the hands of the only man who had ever truly seen me, a small, childish part of me was still screaming, "Mom, please look at me. Please just look at me." The ceremony was a blur of vows and sunlight, but the image that would stick with me forever came later. When the photographer sent us the proofs, there was one photo taken from the back of the aisle. It showed Miles and me standing at the altar. To our right, a wall of people, standing, clapping, cheering. To our left, 4 white chairs, stark and vacant against the green grass. In the photo, I am turning my head slightly, smiling at Miles. It is a genuine smile, but if you look closely, you can see the way my hand is gripping his jacket, white-knuckled, holding on for dear life. The caption should have been sadness, but looking at it, I realized it was something else. It was the first documentation of my freedom. The empty chairs did not mean I was unloved. They just meant that the people who were supposed to love me had chosen to be spectators in their own lives, while I was finally brave enough to be the main character in mine, love. I realized as I stared at that photo, does not need an audience to be real, but God. It hurts when the people you want in the front row choose to stay in the lobby. 3 weeks after the wedding, that wasn't. The phone rang. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind of mundane, quiet night that usually felt safe. I was folding laundry on the sofa while Miles reviewed blueprints for a commercial retrofit at the kitchen island. When I saw Mother on the caller ID, my stomach did that familiar gymnastic flip, half hope, half nausea. I answered. "Aurora, darling," she said. Her voice was spun sugar, light and airy, the tone she used when she was hosting a garden party or trying to return a blouse she had already worn. "Your father and I were talking. We think enough time has passed for everyone to cool down." I stopped folding a towel. "Okay," I said, cautious. "We are hosting a small dinner on Saturday. Just immediate family and the Prescotts. You remember the Prescotts? Their son just made partner at his firm. We would love for you and Miles to join us." She said his name like it was a word in a foreign language she was trying not to mispronounce. "You want us to come to Raleigh?" I asked. "Ideally," she continued, breezing past my surprise. "But listen, sweetie, it is going to be a refined evening. So, could you make sure he wears a suit? A proper one? And maybe brief him?" "Brief him?" "You know," she lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Just remind him that dinner conversation should remain pleasant. We do not need to hear about clogs or sewage or whatever it is he deals with all day. Let's keep it to business owner and leave the messy details for his work friends. We don't want to make the Prescotts uncomfortable." The conditions hung in the air. Invisible tripwires. "Come, but hide who he is. Come, but pretend you are the version of yourself we ordered." I should have said no. I should have hung up, but the little girl in me, the one who just wanted her mother to brush her hair and tell her she was good, took the wheel. "I will tell him," I said. When I hung up, Miles was watching me. He had not heard her side of the conversation, but he had read my face. "They want us to come for dinner," I said, unable to meet his eyes. "But it is formal." Miles set down his pen. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Okay," he said. "We will go." "You do not have to," I rushed to add. "I know they are difficult." "Aurora," he said, his voice level. "I am your husband. If you want to go, we go. I can wear a suit. I can talk about the weather. I can do whatever you need." He was doing it for me, and God help me, I let him. The drive to Raleigh took 2.5 hours. We pulled into the driveway of my parents' colonial brick house exactly at 7 o'clock. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life. The windows glowed with a warm, inviting light that I knew was purely engineered. Inside, the house smelled of expensive candles and roast beef. My mother greeted us with air kisses that didn't touch the skin. My father shook Miles's hand with a grip that was less about welcoming and more about testing for weakness. "Miles," my father said, nodding. "Good to see you found a suit that fits." "It is amazing what you can find when you look," Miles said, his tone polite but firm. He didn't take the bait. We moved to the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the gold-rimmed plates reserved for people my parents actually respected. Sienna was there, of course. She was sitting at the end of the table, her phone propped up against a crystal water glass, recording a time-lapse of the dinner setup. She waved a manicured hand at us without looking up from her screen. "Hey guys," she said. "Love the tie. Miles, very corporate cosplay." We sat. The Prescotts were a nice enough older couple who clearly had no idea they were walking into a minefield. They asked polite questions. My mother steered the conversation aggressively toward safe topics, real estate values, the new country club renovations, the fluctuating price of gold. Then, inevitably, Mr. Prescott turned to Miles. "So, Miles," he said, cutting a piece of beef. "Aurora tells me you run your own operation. What sector?" My mother froze. I saw her hand tighten around the stem of her wine glass. "I own a plumbing and mechanical services company," Miles said. He didn't whisper it. He didn't apologize for it. He said it with the same casual confidence a neurosurgeon might use to state his specialty. "Oh, Mr. Prescott said, blinking. "Plumbing. That is lucrative. I hear." "It is essential," Miles corrected gently. "We handle high-pressure commercial systems mostly. Hospitals, municipal water grids. If we do our job right, you never have to think about us. If we do it wrong, cities shut down." I felt a swell of pride in my chest. He made it sound like he was the guardian of civilization, which, in a way, he was. My mother cleared her throat, a sharp, brittle sound. "Yes, well," she said, flashing a tight smile at Mrs. Prescott. "It is certainly honorable work. Someone has to do the dirty jobs, I suppose." The insult was wrapped in silk, but it landed like a slap. Dirty jobs. She was reducing him to filth at her dinner table. "It is honest work, Joyce," Miles said, looking directly at her. "There is no dirt in honest work, only in the things people try to hide." The table went silent. My father chewed his roast beef aggressively. Sienna, sensing the tension, decided it was her moment. She picked up her phone, checked her reflection in the screen, and then turned her gaze on me. Her eyes were bright with malice. "You know," she said, her voice pitched high enough to carry, "I was just telling my followers about how romantic it is that you guys eloped, basically. It is so brave." "We did not elope, Sienna," I said, my voice tight. "You just didn't come." "Details," she waved a hand. "But honestly, Aurora, I have to ask, because people are curious." She leaned in, a shark smelling blood. "Did you marry him because it was true love? Or was it just panic? I mean, 34 is getting up there. Were you afraid this was the last train leaving the station?" She laughed, a light, tinkling laugh that sounded like glass breaking. She looked at her phone as if checking to see if her audience enjoyed the zinger. The air left the room. My face burned. Shame, hot and familiar, flooded my veins. I looked at the Prescotts, who were studying their salads. I looked at my mother, who was sipping her wine, not stopping her. My reflex kicked in. The peacemaker, the fixer, the doormat. "Oh, she is just joking," I stammered, turning to Mr. Prescott, desperate to normalize the moment. "Sienna has a specific sense of humor, and Miles knows she doesn't mean it. We are very happy. Really, Miles is doing very well. He is looking into expanding into HVAC next year. So really, it is a smart match, financially speaking." I was rambling. I was justifying him. I was trying to sell my husband's value to people who would never buy it. Suddenly, a hand covered mine on the table. It was heavy and warm. I stopped talking and looked at Miles. He wasn't looking at my family. He was looking at me. His expression wasn't angry, but it was incredibly sad. "Aurora," he said quietly, I just wanted them to know. I started. Stop, he said. He squeezed my hand. Not to hurt me, but to wake me up. You do not have to sell me to them. You do not owe them an explanation for why you love me. And you certainly do not owe them an apology for my existence. He stood up. He placed his napkin neatly on the table, next to his untouched plate. Thank you for dinner. Joyce, Robert, he said to my parents. His voice was devoid of sarcasm. It was the voice of a man who had seen exactly what he needed to see. We will be going now. Sit down. Miles, my father barked. We haven't had dessert. We are full, Miles said. He held out a hand to me. Coming? I looked at my mother. She looked furious. I looked at Sienna. She looked bored. Then I looked at Miles's hand. It was the only real thing in the room. I stood up. We walked out of the house in silence. We didn't say a word until we were 5 miles down the interstate, the lights of Raleigh fading in the rearview mirror. I sat in the passenger seat, my hands trembling in my lap. I waited for him to yell. I waited for him to tell me I was weak, that I had thrown him under the bus to appease a sister who hated me. But he just drove, one hand on the wheel, his eyes fixed on the road. I am sorry, I whispered finally. Don't be sorry, he said. I thought if we just played by their rules, they would see, I said. Tears finally spilling over. I thought this was a peace offering. It wasn't a peace offering, Aurora, Miles said softly. It was an audition. I looked at him, confused. They wanted to see if I could play the role of the silent, grateful extra in the Aurora Rivera show, he said. And they wanted to see if you would direct me to do it. They weren't inviting us to dinner. They were inviting us to submit to their narrative. He reached over and took my hand again. They failed the audition, he said. Not us. I looked out the window at the passing darkness. He was right. I had gone there hoping to be welcomed back into the family. Instead, I realized that the price of admission was my husband's dignity. And for the first time in my life, I knew that price was too high. The dinner hadn't been a reconciliation. It had been a final inspection. And as we drove into the night, I realized I was done trying to pass their code. The atmosphere in our home shifted after the dinner at my parents' house. It was not a coldness, exactly, but a density. The air felt heavier, charged with static, like the sky before a summer thunderstorm. Miles began coming home late. Not the stuck-in-traffic kind of late, or the last-minute emergency call, late that I was used to. This was different. He would pull into the driveway at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and then he would just sit there. I watched him from the darkened bedroom window. Peering through the slats of the blinds, the interior light of his truck would be off, but the glow of the dashboard would cast his face in a ghostly green relief. He would sit with his hands gripping the steering wheel, his head bowed, staring at nothing, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for 20. He looked like a man trying to decompose his own thoughts before walking through the front door. When he finally came inside, he would smell of rain and exhaust, and his smile, though warm, didn't quite reach his eyes. I worked in risk compliance. My entire career was built on identifying anomalies in data patterns. I knew that when a variable changed without explanation, it was rarely a glitch. It was a warning. My focus narrowed on the red metal toolbox in the bottom of our closet. It was a standard issue, heavy-duty utility box, scratched and dented from years of use, but Miles treated it like a holy relic. He kept it padlocked with a heavy brass master lock, the kind you use for storage units, not for a box of wrenches. A plumber having tools at home is normal. A plumber locking those tools away in his master bedroom, rather than the garage or his truck, is a red flag. I tried to be the cool wife. I tried to respect his privacy. I told myself that everyone had a right to a private inner life. Maybe he kept cash in there. Maybe he kept old love letters from high school. Maybe it was just sentimental. But the risk analyst in my brain kept whispering, deviation from the norm, investigate. Then the storm hit. It was a Tuesday night, 3 weeks after the disastrous dinner. A nor'easter rolled in off the coast. battering the Carolinas with wind that shook the window panes in their frames. I was in the kitchen making tea when the world went black. The power grid, overwhelmed by the gale, had snapped. The house was plunged into a thick, suffocating darkness. "Miles?" I called out, but the house was empty. He was not home yet. I fumbled for my phone, using the weak flashlight beam to navigate the hallway. I needed the heavy-duty mag light we kept for emergencies. I knew exactly where it was, inside the red toolbox. I made my way to the bedroom, the wind howling outside like a wounded animal. I knelt in front of the closet and dragged the heavy box out onto the carpet. I fully expected it to be locked, and I was already mentally preparing to hunt for the key in Miles's nightstand drawer. But when I tugged on the padlock, the shackle popped open. He had forgotten to click it shut. My heart did a strange, syncopated flutter. It was a breach of protocol. Miles never made mistakes like this. He was meticulous. The fact that he had left it unlocked meant he was distracted, or exhausted, or both. I lifted the heavy steel lid. The beam of my phone light swept over the contents. I expected wrenches, screwdrivers, maybe a spare pressure gauge, and they were there, sitting in the top tray. But underneath the tray, nestled in a space where a power drill should have been, was something else. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope. It looked out of place among the grease-stained metal, like a pearl in a pile of coal. The paper was heavy, expensive stock. There was no stamp. It had been hand-delivered or sent via private courier. I reached for the flashlight, grabbed it, and turned it on. Then, with trembling fingers, I picked up the envelope. The return address was embossed in the upper left corner. It was not a supplier. It was not a bill collector. It was the logo of a major national broadcasting network, paired with the seal of a federal agency I recognized from the news. The kind of agency that deals with disasters, not drainage. Mr. Miles Rivera. The front read in severe typed letters. I knew I shouldn't open it. I knew this was the boundary line. But the risk part of my brain was screaming that I was already in the danger zone. I slid my finger under the flap. It wasn't sealed shut. He had already opened it. I pulled out a single sheet of paper and a glossy brochure. "Dear Mr. Rivera, we are writing to confirm your participation in the upcoming televised special, Heroes of the Hidden, produced in cooperation with the Department of Emergency Response. Your actions during the collapse 5 years ago remain a benchmark for civilian bravery. We understand your reluctance to revisit the event, but your testimony is crucial for the fundraising effort." The words swam before my eyes. Civilian bravery, collapse, testimony. I lowered the letter, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. This wasn't about plumbing. This wasn't about a side job. This was about a past life, a life where my husband, the man who fixed leaky faucets and listened to me complain about spreadsheets, was apparently a hero. What collapse? What had he done? And why? In the 2 years we had been together, had he never breathed a word of this to me? Suddenly, the front door slammed downstairs. The wind roared into the house for a second before the door was muscled shut. I heard heavy boots on the stairs. I couldn't move. I sat there on the floor, the flashlight beam illuminating the letter in my lap like a spotlight on a crime scene. Miles appeared in the doorway. He was soaking wet, his hair plastered to his forehead, his jacket dripping onto the floor. He looked wild, frantic. "Aurora, the power is out. Are you—" He stopped. The beam of the flashlight hit his face. He blinked, shielding his eyes, and then he looked down. He saw the open toolbox. He saw the envelope in my hand. For a second, I expected anger. I expected him to shout about privacy, about boundaries. I braced myself for the fight, but he didn't yell. His shoulders slumped. The tension that had been holding him upright seemed to drain out of him, leaving him looking younger and infinitely more tired. He walked into the room slowly, water dripping from his coat, and sat down on the edge of the bed, facing me. "I was looking for the flashlight," I whispered, my voice shaking. "The lock was open." "I know," he said. His voice was rough, quiet. "I was tired this morning. I must have missed the click. Miles, I said, holding up the paper. What is this? Who are these people? He looked at the letter, then at me. His eyes were dark pools of sorrow. It is just a TV show. Aurora. They want to talk about a bad day I had a long time ago. A bad day? I asked, incredulous. They are calling you a hero. They are talking about a collapse. Why didn't you tell me? He ran a hand over his wet face. Because I am not a hero, he said firmly. I am a plumber. I fix things. That is who I am now. But you hid this, I said. You locked it away like it was a dirty secret. Why? He looked at me then, and the vulnerability in his expression broke my heart. I did not hide it because I don't trust you. Aurora, he said. I hid it because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that if you knew, he said, his voice barely audible over the sound of the rain, you would look at me differently. You look at me now and you see Miles, just Miles, the guy who makes you coffee and fixes the sink. If you read that if you see what happened, I was scared you would start seeing the trauma instead of the man. I didn't want to be a tragedy to you. I just wanted to be your husband. I sat there, the letter heavy in my hand, realizing that while I had been worried about my family judging him for being too simple, he had been terrified that I would judge him for being too complex. He hadn't been hiding a crime. He had been protecting our normalcy. Miles, I said, reaching out to touch his wet knee. You can't hide a fire in a wooden box. Eventually, it burns through. He looked at the letter, then at the window where the storm was raging. They want me to go to New York, he said. They want me to tell the story. I looked at the letter again. National broadcast. Then we go, I said. He looked at me, surprised. You want to go? I want to know who I married, I said softly. And I think it is time the world knew, too. The digital assassination began on a Thursday morning. Just as the sun was trying to break through the gray aftermath of the storm, I woke up to a phone that was vibrating so intensely it was slowly inching its way across the nightstand. I assumed it was Miles checking in, or maybe a work email about a compliance breach. It was neither. It was a notification from Instagram. My sister, Sienna, had posted a photo. It was a throwback Thursday picture of me from when I was 14 years old. In the photo, I was wearing thick glasses and oversized braces, looking awkward and eager to please in a dress my mother had picked out. I looked vulnerable. I looked like a child who just wanted to be told she was good. The caption read, "Missing the days when family came first. It breaks my heart that my big sister has chosen to walk away from the people who raised her for a life of lower standards. We gave her everything, but I guess some people prefer to live in the mud. Love you always. Aurora, even if you are lost." Family, first heartbroken sisters. It was a masterclass in passive aggression. She had weaponized my awkward adolescence and framed my marriage as a tragedy, all while positioning herself as the benevolent, grieving saint. I scrolled down. The comments were already pouring in like toxic sludge. So brave of you to share this. Sigh, you deserve better. Imagine leaving the Riveras for a plumber. Yikes. Praying for your family. Some people just don't appreciate their roots. My chest tightened. She hadn't just insulted me. She had turned my life into a public forum for strangers to debate my worth. She had dragged the entire city of Raleigh into our private conflict, forcing people to pick sides. And because she controlled the narrative, everyone was picking hers. By the time I got to work, the fallout had bled into the real world. My mother's friends, women who had known me since I was in diapers, started texting. Their messages were identical in tone, feigned concern wrapping a core of judgment. Your poor mother is devastated. Aurora, after all, they paid for your education. I saw Sienna's post. Is it true you aren't speaking to them? Family is all we have. Dear, I walked into the office at Viridian Trust, feeling like I had a target painted on my back. Usually, the compliance department is a quiet zone, filled with the hum of servers and the click of keyboards. But as I walked to my cubicle, the typing stopped. Two junior analysts near the water cooler fell silent and suddenly found the floor very interesting. A manager from the risk division gave me a tight, pitying smile, the kind you give to someone who has just been diagnosed with a terminal illness, or who has publicly embarrassed themselves. No one said a word. The silence was suffocating. It was a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders. I sat at my desk and stared at my screens, but the numbers blurred. I felt exposed. I felt like the 14-year-old girl in the photo, standing alone while the cool kids laughed. I left work early. I couldn't breathe in there. I decided to stop at the grocery store on the way home, thinking that a mundane task would ground me. I needed milk. I needed eggs. I needed to feel like a normal person living a normal life. I was in the dairy aisle, reaching for a carton of almond milk, when a young woman stopped her cart next to mine. She looked to be about 20, dressed in trendy athleisure, holding her phone up like a shield. "Excuse me," she said. I turned, expecting her to ask where the yogurt was. "Are you Sienna Rivera's sister?" she asked. Her eyes were bright, not with recognition, but with the thrill of spotting a minor celebrity. I froze. "Yes." "Oh my God," she said, turning her phone around so the camera faced us. "Can we get a quick selfie? I am a huge fan of her channel. It is so crazy about your husband, right? Like, total drama." She didn't wait for an answer. She leaned in, invading my personal space, and snapped a photo. I stood there, clutching the cold carton of milk, too stunned to move. I wasn't a person to her. I wasn't Aurora. I was just a prop in her content. I was a side character in the Sienna Rivera show, existing only to provide conflict for the main star. "Thanks," she chirped, already typing a caption as she walked away. The carton of milk slipped from my fingers. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. Splitting open, white liquid pooled around my shoes, spreading across the linoleum like spilled paint. I stared at the puddle. My breath started to hitch. "I am sorry." I thought, "I am so sorry." The apology rose in my throat, automatic and bitter. I was apologizing for existing. I was apologizing for taking up space. I left the cart. I left the milk. I walked out of the store, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. By the time I got to my car, my hands were numb. My vision was tunneling. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel, gasping for air that wouldn't come. It was a panic attack. I knew the symptoms, but knowing them didn't stop the terror. It felt like the walls of the car were closing in, like the entire world was shrinking down to crush me. For 34 years, I realized with a sudden, horrifying clarity, I had lived in permission mode. I asked permission to speak. I asked permission to choose my career. I asked permission to love. And now that I had finally stopped asking, the world was punishing me for it. I don't remember calling Miles. I must have hit his speed dial, because 20 minutes later, his truck pulled up next to my car. He opened my door. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask why I was crying. He just unbuckled my seatbelt, pulled me out of the car, and wrapped his arms around me. He smelled of copper and rain. He felt solid. He was the only thing in the world that wasn't spinning. "I am here," he said into my hair. "I have got you. Breathe. Aurora. Just breathe." We stood there in the parking lot for a long time. When my breathing finally slowed, when the feeling returned to my fingers, I looked up at him. "They are laughing at us," I whispered. "Sienna turned us into a joke. Everyone thinks you are nothing. Everyone thinks I am a fool." Miles wiped a tear from my cheek with his thumb. "Let them think what they want. We know the truth." "No," I said, a sudden, hot anger replacing the fear. "I don't want to just know the truth. I want them to know it. I want you to go on that show. Miles." He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "I want you to go on TV," I continued, the words tumbling out fast and sharp. "I want you to wear your best suit. I want you to tell them about the rescue. I want you to show everyone, my mother, Sienna, the girls at work, that you are a hero. I want to see the look on their faces when they realize how wrong they were. I want to crush them." I stopped, panting slightly. The desire for revenge was a physical taste in my mouth, metallic and sweet. Miles didn't smile. He didn't look triumphant. He stepped back slightly, his hands resting on my shoulders. "Aurora," he said, his voice low and serious. "If we do this, we do it because it is the right thing to do. We do it to help the fund. We do it to honor the people who didn't make it out of that tunnel. But don't you want to show them?" I demanded. "Don't you want to win?" "If you use the truth as a weapon," Miles said, looking deep into my eyes, "it will leave you hollow. Revenge feels good for a second, but it eats you from the inside out. I am not going to be a tool for you to hurt your mother. I am not going to be a prop in your war with Sienna." His words hit me harder than the panic attack had. I felt a flush of shame burn through me. He was right. I was doing exactly what Sienna did, using him. She used him for content. I wanted to use him for vengeance. Neither of us was treating him like a husband. "I am sorry," I whispered, my anger dissolving into exhaustion. "We will go to New York," Miles said firmly. "But we go for us, not for them. If they see it, they see it, but we are not performing for their applause anymore. That is the only way we are truly free." He drove me home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got out of bed and went to the bookshelf in the living room. I pulled down an old, dusty photo album from the bottom shelf. It was from before Sienna was born, before the pressure to be perfect had fully clamped down on my life. I found a picture of myself at 5 years old. I was playing in the mud in the backyard. My dress was ruined. My hair was a disaster. But I was grinning at the camera with a wild, untamed joy. I wasn't looking to see if my mother was watching. I wasn't checking my angles. I was just happy. I traced the face of that little girl with my finger. She didn't need an audience. She didn't need permission. I closed the album. "I am coming back for you," I whispered to the empty room, and for the first time in weeks, I actually believed it. The silence in the house that night was different. It was not the tense silence of things unsaid, but the hollow silence of a structure that had been stripped down to the studs. I sat on the living room rug, the photo album open on my lap, but I was no longer looking at the pictures. I was looking at the negative space between them. For 34 years, I had been a collection of labels printed by other people. To my mother, I was the sensible daughter, the one who was useful but not decorative. To my sister, I was the cautionary tale, the prop she used to make her own life look more vibrant. To the world at work, I was the compliance officer, the person who said no so others could say yes. Even to myself, I had become the grateful wife, the woman so shocked that someone loved her that she spent every day trying to earn it. I did not know who Aurora was. If you took away the daughter, the sister, and the wife, was there anyone left in the room? Miles found me there at 2 a.m. He did not turn on the overhead lights. He just walked in, the floorboards settling under his weight, and sat down on the sofa behind me. He handed me a mug of tea. It was lukewarm, exactly how I liked it, so I didn't burn my tongue. "You are thinking too loud," he said softly. "I can hear it from the bedroom." I took the mug, wrapping my cold hands around the ceramic. "I am thinking that I am a fraud, Miles. I told you I wanted to go to New York to support you, but earlier today, in the car, I wanted to go to hurt them. I wanted to use your pain as a stick to beat my family with." "I know," he said. He didn't sound accusatory. He sounded tired. "Why do you do it?" I asked, turning to look at him. The street lamp outside cast long shadows across his face, highlighting the premature lines around his eyes. "Why plumbing? You are smart enough to be an engineer. You are charismatic enough to be in sales. Why choose a job that makes people look down on you?" Miles took a long sip of his own tea. He set the mug down on the coaster with deliberate precision. "Because pipes do not scream," he said. The words hung in the air, heavy and blunt. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, clasping his hands together. 7 years ago, before I met you, I was part of a heavy urban search and rescue task force. I was not just a volunteer. I was the lead technical extraction specialist. I knew he had done rescue work, but I had never asked for the details. I had treated it like a hobby, something he did on weekends. The tunnel collapse, he continued, his voice steady but distant. It was rush hour. A structural failure in the Midtown connector, concrete, rebar, soil. It all came down on top of 40 cars. I stopped breathing. I remembered that on the news, it was a national tragedy. We were the first ones in, Miles said. My job was to crawl into the voids. Spaces too small for the jaws of life. Spaces where the air was running out. I had to decide who we cut out first. I had to decide who we left behind because the structure was shifting. He looked at his hands, those same hands that I had watched fix a sink, fix a door, hold my waist. I pulled 12 people out of that hole, he said, but I left 5 behind. I had to, if I had tried to get them. The secondary collapse would have killed my whole team. I made the math work. I followed the protocol. He looked up at me, and his eyes were wet. But I still hear them. Aurora. I hear them waiting for me. Miles, I whispered, reaching for his knee. I quit 6 months later, he said. I couldn't make life or death decisions anymore. I wanted a life where the worst thing that happens is a wet carpet. I chose plumbing because it is concrete. It is solvable. A pipe is broken. I fix it. The water flows. Nobody dies if I'm 5 minutes late. Nobody dies if I need to take a lunch break. I needed the quiet. Aurora. I needed the mundane. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt a wave of shame so profound, it almost knocked me over. My parents saw a man who cleaned toilets. I saw a man who was carrying the weight of the world and had chosen a life of service to keep himself sane. And the TV show? I asked. The fund, he said. The survivors fund for the families of the 5 people we couldn't save. It is running dry. The network promised that if I do this interview, they will donate $50,000 and open a national text-to-donate line. I am not going there to be a hero. Aurora, I am going there to pay a debt. The room was silent again, but the density had changed. The anger I had felt towards Sienna, the need for validation from my mother. It all evaporated. It felt small. It felt petty. My husband was a giant, and I had been worried about what people who lived their lives on Instagram thought of him. We are going, I said. My voice was steady now. Are you sure? Miles asked. Your family. No, I cut him off. Not for them. This has nothing to do with them. They do not get to be part of this story, not even as villains. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark street. I am not calling my mother, I said, listing the terms like I was reading a new contract. I am not asking for permission to take time off. I am not telling Sienna so she can spin it. We are going to New York. We are going to that studio. And I am going to sit in the green room and hold your jacket while you do what you need to do. And then we are going to come home and order pizza. Miles stood up and came to stand beside me. You are okay with them not knowing? Are you okay with the silence? I am done with the noise, I said. The next morning, I called Chloe. Finally, she said when I told her the plan. I have been waiting 5 years for you to stop auditioning for a role you were never going to get. I am scared, I admitted. I feel like I am amputating a limb. You are, Chloe said, her voice fierce. But it is a gangrenous limb. Aurora, cut it off so the rest of you can survive. You are not going there to perform. You are going there to witness. Stand by the man who chose you when you were nothing but a raw nerve. On the day we left for New York, I stood in front of my closet. My usual meet the public clothes were there. The beige suits, the modest florals, the things my mother would approve of. Safe choices, camouflage. I pushed them aside. I reached for a dress I had bought 3 years ago and never worn. It was navy blue, simple, structured, with a neckline that showed my collarbones. It wasn't flashy. It didn't scream, "Look at me." It whispered, "I am here." I put it on. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like a compliance officer. I didn't look like a plumber's wife. I didn't look like a disappointment. I looked like Aurora. Miles walked in, wearing his suit. He stopped when he saw me. "You look," he started, then paused, searching for the word. "I look like myself," I finished for him. He smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it reached his eyes. "Yeah, you do." "Let's go," I said, grabbing my purse. "We have a job to do." We walked out of the house, leaving the ghost of my family's expectations locked inside, gathering dust. I didn't check my phone. I didn't check Instagram. For the first time in my life, I was walking towards something without looking back to see if I was being followed. The email from the network producer arrived on a Tuesday morning, crisp and professional. It confirmed the logistics for the broadcast, flight numbers, hotel confirmation numbers, and the call time for the live taping. The date was bolded in the center of the screen, November 12th. I stared at the date, and a cold knot formed in my stomach. Of course, it had to be November 12th. November 12th was the date of the Rivera Annual Autumn Gala. This year, it was doubling as the official launch party for Sienna's new Mindful Living home decor line. It was the single biggest event on my family's social calendar. The governor was invited. The local press had been running teasers for weeks. My absence would not just be noticed, it would be a statement. My phone rang almost instantly, as if my mother had a psychic link to my inbox. "Aurora," she said, skipping the greeting. "Sienna just saw the finalized guest list. Your name is marked as pending." "Why is it pending?" "I cannot make it." "Mom," I said. I was standing in my kitchen, gripping the edge of the granite counter. My knuckles were white, but my voice was steady. "Excuse me?" Her tone dropped an octave, entering the danger zone. "This is not a barbecue, Aurora. This is your sister's launch. The Observer is sending a photographer specifically to get a family portrait. We need the unified front, especially after the mess you made online." She was blaming me for the comments on Sienna's post. "I have a prior commitment," I said. "Cancel it," she commanded. "I do not care what it is. Unless you are in the hospital or in jail, you are coming to the country club at 6 o'clock. Do not be selfish." "I am not being selfish," I said, surprised by how calm I felt. "I am being busy. Miles and I are going to New York." There was a pause, a silence so sharp it could cut glass. "New York?" She let out a short, incredulous laugh. "For what? Is there a plumbing convention? Is he winning an award for the fastest toilet unclog?" The insult was lazy, but it still stung. "No," I said. "It is for something important. Something that matters to him." "Matters to him?" She spat the words out. "Aurora, look at what you are doing. You are choosing a tradesman's hobby over your family's legacy. You are embarrassing us. Again, what could possibly be more important than supporting your sister?" "My husband," I said. "My husband is more important." I didn't wait for her response. I hung up. I expected the silence to last, but I should have known better. My family does not accept defeat. They simply escalate the siege. By noon, the campaign had begun. First, it was Aunt Carol, texting me to say how worried everyone was about my mental state. Then, it was a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, asking if I was okay and suggesting that skipping the gala looked unstable. Then came the nuclear option. At 2 o'clock, my boss at Viridian Trust walked by my desk. He paused, leaning casually against the partition. "Aurora," he said, tapping a pen against his chin. "Funny thing, I ran into your father at the Rotary lunch today. He mentioned you might be taking some personal leave next week. He seemed concerned about your bandwidth, wanted to make sure you weren't burning out." My blood ran cold. My father wasn't just checking on me. He was signaling to my employer that I was fragile, unreliable. He was threatening my livelihood to force me into line. "My bandwidth is fine, sir," I said. typing a command I didn't need into my spreadsheet. My father worries too much. I will be back in the office on Thursday. He nodded, looking unconvinced, and walked away. The final blow came from Sienna herself. She didn't attack. She didn't yell. She FaceTimed me at 5 o'clock, wearing a charcoal face mask, looking deceptively vulnerable. "Rory," she said, using a childhood nickname she hadn't used in a decade. "Look, forget Mom. Forget the gala. I need you there." "Why?" I asked. "You have 300 guests coming. Sienna, you won't even notice I'm gone." "That is not true," she sighed, adjusting the camera. "Look, the engagement on my family values content is tanking. People are starting to comment that I'm a hypocrite for preaching connection when my own sister won't be in the room. The rumors are getting nasty. They are saying I bullied you." "You did bully me," I pointed out. "That is just branding," she snapped, then caught herself. "Look, just come for 20 minutes. We take one photo. You, me, Mom, Dad. We smile. I post it with a caption about healing and sisters forever. Then you can leave. You can go to your little trip with Miles. I just need the visual proof that we are fine. It is a business transaction, okay?" I stared at her pixelated face. She didn't want her sister. She wanted a prop. She wanted a cardboard cutout of Aurora to stand in the background so she could sell more organic linen sheets. "No," I said. "Aurora, seriously, I am not a prop. Sienna," I said. "And I am not your content. Good luck with the launch." I ended the call. I walked into the living room. Miles was sitting at the dining table, surrounded by crumpled balls of notebook paper. He was staring at a blank index card, a pen hovering over the lines. He looked more stressed than I had ever seen him. "Writer's block?" I asked, sitting down across from him. He dropped the pen. "I sound like a greeting card," he groaned. The producer sent over some talking points. They want me to say things like, "Every life is precious, and heroism is a choice." It feels fake. I was not thinking about heroism. Aurora. I was thinking about how much the smoke burned my eyes. I reached across the table and took his hand. "Then say that." "I can't say that on national television." "Why not?" I asked. "Miles, they do not need another speech about glory. They need to know what it costs. Don't tell them what they expect. Tell them what you lived. Tell them about the 5 people you couldn't save. Tell them about the silence in the tunnel." He looked at me, the tension in his jaw softening. "The truth? Only the truth," I said. "It is the only thing we have left." He picked up the pen again. He didn't write on the index card. He turned over a piece of scrap paper and started writing fast, his hand moving with the same urgency he used when fixing a burst pipe. He wrote for 10 minutes without stopping. When he finished, he pushed the paper toward me. "Read the last part," he said quietly. I looked down at his blocky, architectural handwriting. "People ask me how I live with the quiet after the noise stops, how I go back to fixing sinks after holding a dying man's hand. I used to think I did it by shutting down, but I realized I do it because I have an anchor. My wife, Aurora. She doesn't ask me to be a hero. She doesn't ask me to be a success. She just asks me to be home. She stands in the dark with me so I do not have to be afraid of the shadows. And that takes more courage than anything I did in that tunnel." My eyes filled with tears. I looked up at him. "You are going to say this?" I asked. "It is the truth," he said, shrugging. "You told me to speak the truth." "My mother will hate it," I said, a smile breaking through the tears. "She will hate that you are crediting me for your strength instead of her genetics." "Good," Miles said. My phone started buzzing again on the table. It was my father, probably calling to escalate the threat, to tell me I was being disowned, or written out of the will, or uninvited from Christmas. I looked at the screen, then I looked at Miles, who was watching me with that steady, calm gaze that anchored me to the earth. I picked up the phone. I didn't answer it. I slid the button on the side, silencing the ringer. Then I went into the settings and turned off all notifications. No banners, no pings, no vibrations. "What are you doing?" Miles asked. "I am letting them scream into the void," I said, placing the phone face down on the table. The house was quiet. For the first time in 34 years, the noise of my family was happening somewhere else, and I wasn't there to hear it. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. "Read it to me again," I said to Miles. From the beginning, and as he began to read, his voice filling the kitchen, I knew that come November 12th, while my family was posing for fake photos in Raleigh, we would be in New York, telling a story that was finally, undeniably ours. The security checkpoint at the network studios in New York City felt less like a media center and more like a border crossing into a foreign country. We had to show our identification 3 times before we were even allowed near the elevators. The hallway leading to the green room was lined with framed photographs of legendary news anchors and talk show hosts, their eyes following us as we walked. I held Miles's hand. His palm was damp. This was a man who could crawl into a collapsing tunnel without hesitating. But put him in a suit and march him toward a television camera, and he looked like he was walking to the gallows. The green room was small, cold, and quiet. A fruit platter that looked too perfect to be real sat untouched on a coffee table. I sat down on a stiff leather sofa. Smoothing the fabric of my navy dress, my heart was doing a frantic, irregular tap dance against my ribs. I had spent 34 years of my life trying to avoid being looked at. I had dressed to blend in. I had spoken to agree. I had lived my life in the background. In 20 minutes, 5 million people were going to look at us. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I knew I should have turned it off completely, but some masochistic part of me had left it on vibrate. I pulled it out, a text message from my father. "I am proud of you. Kid, knock them dead." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the glass. A month ago, this text would have made me weep with gratitude. I would have shown it to Miles like a trophy. "See? He loves me. He sees me." But now, reading it in the harsh fluorescent light of a makeup room, it felt different. It felt like a hedge. My father was a man who bet on winning horses. He had realized that the gala in Raleigh might be the B-list event tonight, and he was placing a small wager on the A-list just in case. It wasn't love. It was risk management. I didn't reply. I slid the phone back into my bag. Then, it buzzed again, and again. A continuous, angry rhythm. Mom. She was calling. I could picture her perfectly, standing in the ballroom at the country club, wearing her emerald gown, a glass of champagne in one hand and her phone in the other. Her smile tight and dangerous. She wasn't calling to wish me luck. She was calling to reel me back in. She was calling to remind me of my place. The guilt rose up in my throat, acrid and familiar. It was a physical reflex, trained into me like a dog responding to a whistle. Answer her. Apologize. Fix it. Don't, a voice said. I looked up. Miles wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the floor. But he knew, before I could answer. My phone lit up with a different name, Chloe. I answered it immediately. "Tell me you are breathing," Chloe said, her voice cutting through the static in my head. "Barely," I admitted. "I feel like I'm about to throw up." "Good. That means you are alive," she said. "Listen to me. Aurora, I know you. I know right now you are thinking about how you look. You are thinking about whether your mother is watching. You are thinking about whether you are going to embarrass the family name." "I am," I whispered. "Stop it," she commanded. "Tonight is not a performance. You are not there to prove anything to those people in Raleigh. You are not there to win a Daughter of the Year award. You are just there to stand next to the man who chose you. That is it. Be a witness, not a performer. Just stand," I repeated. "Just stand," she said. "And if you get scared, look at Miles. He is the only reality in the room." I hung up. The guilt regarding my mother didn't vanish, but it settled, heavy and still, like sediment at the bottom of a glass. I turned to Miles. He was staring at the monitor on the wall, which was showing the live feed of the news desk. The anchors were laughing about a weather segment. "I hate this," he said, his voice low. "I hate that I am here. I feel like a fraud. Aurora, real heroes don't go on talk shows." "You are not a fraud," I said, moving to sit next to him. "You are just a man who did a good thing and is terrified of taking credit for it." "I am scared I'm going to freeze," he confessed, looking at me with wide, panicked eyes. "I am scared I am going to open my mouth and nothing will come out, and I will look like an idiot, and I will prove your mother right, that I am just a plumber playing dress-up." I took his face in my hands. His skin was cool. "Then we will look like idiots together," I said fiercely. "If you freeze, I will hold your hand. If you fall, I will catch you." We walked down the aisle together when the seats were empty. "Miles, we can walk onto a stage together when the seats are full." The door opened. A woman with a headset and a clipboard walked in. She didn't look like the polished assistants I had seen earlier. She looked tired and serious. This was the senior producer. "2 minutes," she said. She looked at Miles, then at me. "I just came to tell you something. The network executives want the hero angle. They want the swelling music and the tears." Miles tensed. "But," she continued, lowering her clipboard, "I was in New York during 9/11. I know that rescue work isn't pretty, so here's the deal. If the host asks you a question, and the answer isn't on the cue card you say what you need to say, screw the script. We are live. They can't cut you." She gave us a sharp nod and walked out. Miles looked at me. A strange calm settled over his features. The permission to be real had done what the permission to be famous could not. It grounded him. "Screw the script," he repeated. We stood up. As we walked down the hallway toward the wings of the stage, I glanced at a bank of monitors set up for the crew. One of them was tuned to a local affiliate feed, probably checking signal strength. By some twist of fate, or maybe just the universe having a sense of humor, it was showing a live stream from a social media feed. It was Sienna. She was live from the gala in Raleigh. The sound was off, but I didn't need to hear her to know what she was saying. She was standing in front of a flower wall. Her arm linked through my mother's. They were both laughing, heads thrown back in a performance of perfect, unblemished joy. The caption scrolling across the bottom of her feed read, "Family strong. Celebrating our roots tonight." She was erasing my absence. She was pretending I didn't exist, or worse, that I was there, just out of frame, part of the happy tableau. I felt a final snap inside my chest. It wasn't anger. It was the sound of a tether breaking. They were playing a game. They were acting in a play called The Perfect Family, and they were so committed to the role that they didn't even notice the theater was burning down. I looked away from the monitor. I looked at the dark curtain ahead of us. Behind it, the studio audience was applauding. The sound was like crashing waves. "Mr. and Mrs. Rivera?" the stage manager whispered, holding a finger to his lips. "Stand by." I reached out and took Miles's hand. His grip was iron hard. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," I said. And in 5, 4, 3. The stage manager counted down with his fingers. The heavy velvet curtains swept open. The light hit us. It was blinding. A physical wall of white heat. The applause swelled, deafening and immediate. I stepped forward. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking into a room wondering if I was welcome. I wasn't walking in hoping to be liked. I was walking in because I had something to say. And the man next to me had something to teach them. The red light on the main camera turned on. It was a small, unblinking eye. And as I looked into it, I realized I wasn't afraid of the gaze anymore. Because for the first time, I wasn't hiding anything. The red light on the camera was a burning eye, unblinking and judgmental. I sat on the plush studio sofa, my hands folded in my lap, trying to remember how to breathe. The host, a woman with a smile that looked like it had been calibrated by a focus group, leaned forward. "So, Miles," she began, her voice dripping with practiced empathy. "Tell us about that day. Tell us what it feels like to be a hero." I watched my husband, in his charcoal suit. He looked devastatingly handsome, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He looked down at his hands, the hands that had fixed our sink, the hands that had held me through panic attacks, the hands that had dug through rubble. He didn't look at the host. He looked at the camera lens. "It does not feel like heroism," Miles said. His voice was quiet, forcing the audience to lean in. "It feels like dust. It feels like the smell of wet concrete and gasoline. It feels like shaking so hard you can't hold a flashlight steady." The studio went silent. The hero narrative was supposed to be shiny. Miles was making it gritty. "I am a plumber," he continued. "I spend my days fixing things that are broken, leaky pipes, clogged drains. It is simple. You find the problem, you fix it. The water flows. But that day in that tunnel, I couldn't fix it. I was just a man in the dark, listening to people scream for help, and knowing I couldn't get to everyone." He took a breath, and I saw a tear track through the makeup on his cheek. "There are 5 names I say every morning before I drink my coffee," he said. "The ones I had to leave behind. That is not heroism. That is a debt, and I'm just trying to pay the interest." The host looked stunned. She opened her mouth to ask a follow-up question from her cue card. But Miles wasn't finished. He turned in his chair. He stopped looking at the camera and looked directly at me. The cameraman scrambled. I saw the lens swing toward me, capturing my face, my wide eyes, my trembling lips. "I used to think courage was physical," Miles said, his voice gaining strength. "I thought it was running into a collapsing tunnel. I thought it was lifting a beam off a trapped stranger. I was wrong." He reached out and took my hand. His grip was warm and solid. "Courage is not adrenaline," he said to the world, but he was speaking only to me. "Courage is staying soft when life wants to turn you into stone." My breath hitched. "This is my wife, Aurora," Miles said, turning back to the camera. "She is the bravest person I know, not because she pulls people out of fires, but because she stands by people who the world has decided are not important enough." He paused, and his expression hardened slightly. It wasn't anger, but a fierce, protective resolve. "My wife stood alone at our wedding," he said clearly. There were empty chairs in the front row because her family decided that a plumber was not good enough to be in their picture. They decided that her love was a disgrace because it didn't come with a prestigious title. She stood there, in front of everyone, knowing she was being judged, knowing she was being rejected by the people who were supposed to love her unconditionally, and she smiled. She didn't become bitter. She didn't become cruel. She just loved me harder. I felt the tears spill over. I didn't wipe them away. "I am here today to talk about saving lives," Miles said, his voice ringing with finality. "But let me be clear. I am not a prop. I am not a poverty porn story for a gala. And I am certainly not a yardstick for someone's family to measure their status against, and neither is my wife. We are done apologizing for who we are," he finished, "and we are done asking for a seat at a table that is broken." The host stared at him. The cue cards were forgotten. The studio audience, usually prompted to applaud by a flashing sign, erupted on their own. It wasn't polite clapping, it was a roar, as the credits rolled and the director yelled, "Clear!" I looked toward the wings of the stage. The bank of monitors was still active. One screen was still showing the live stream from the gala in Raleigh. Though the sound was muted, it was chaos. On the screen, I saw guests at the gala turning away from the flower wall, their phones in their hands, looking at the large projection screen behind the stage where the broadcast was presumably playing. My mother was frantically gesturing at a technician, her face a mask of panic, trying to get him to cut the feed, but it was too late. Then I saw Sienna. She was still live on her phone, but she wasn't smiling anymore. She was staring at a screen off camera, her mouth open in shock. The comments on her live stream were scrolling so fast they were a blur, but even from here, I could catch the mood. "Is that the plumber you made fun of? Wait, you skipped her wedding? Team Aurora." This is disgusting. Unfollowing. On the monitor. Sienna's hand started to shake. She looked at her phone, reading the real-time destruction of her brand. Then, in a moment of pure, unscripted reality, she dropped the device. The image on the monitor tumbled, showing a blur of the gala ceiling and then going dark. We walked off the stage. My phone, which I had silenced, was lighting up inside my purse like a strobe light. We got into the town car the network had hired. As we pulled away from the studio, sliding into the anonymous traffic of New York City, I finally pulled the phone out. There were 47 missed calls. A text from my mother. It was a misunderstanding. We were watching. We are so proud. Call me immediately. We need to issue a statement. A text from Sienna. You ruined my launch. People are tearing me apart. We need to do a joint interview to clear this up. Pick up the phone. A text from my father. I am sorry. Let's talk. I looked at the messages. I looked at the desperation. For the first time, I saw them not as giants who controlled my fate, but as small, scared people scrambling to control a narrative that had already left the building. I didn't feel a surge of victory. I didn't feel the need to text back a witty retort or rub their faces in it. I just felt light. Are you going to answer? Miles asked. Watching me, I looked at him. No. I turned the phone over and placed it face down on the leather seat. I am hungry, I said. I want a burger, a really greasy one, and I want to wear sweatpants. Miles smiled, leaning back and closing his eyes. That sounds like a plan. Back in the hotel room, we sat on the floor in our pajamas, eating room service burgers out of the box. The city lights of New York twinkled outside the window. Millions of people living their lives, millions of stories. But for the first time, I didn't care about any of them. I looked at Miles, who was wiping ketchup off his chin, looking tired but content. The man who had faced the darkness and come back to fix my sink. The man who had just told the world that I was enough. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that felt cleaner than it had in years. Today I wasn't chosen by them, I whispered, taking a bite of my burger. Today, I chose myself, and that, finally, was the only approval I needed. Thank you so much for listening to this story about finding your voice and standing your ground. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please drop your city or country in the comments below so we can see how far Aurora's story has traveled. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the drama, and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people who need a reminder that they are enough.